Don't even think about leaving that phone booth.
So I've done a few successful short films, and I've made the big decision to move over to make my first feature film. So one of the biggest and most difficult choices is, well, what film should I make? And one of the factors within that choice is, well, how do I get as much of the budget that I can pull together from everywhere onto the screen as physically possible? So an obvious choice would be to find a script which can happen in a single space, a contained film as it were. But aren't I just kind of restricting myself? Aren't I stopping myself from having production value and huge scope and scale? Aren't I just kind of restricting myself? 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 Well, to be honest, INSIDE No.9 has completely proven any of those fears wrong. After 6 seasons, 36 episodes, 14 awards, and 4 of those being BAFTAs, I think we can say with absolute certainty that the contained film is by no means any way to denote the quality of the story you're going to tell. Some of you may have noticed the last kind of 4 episodes have been all about INSIDE No.9. I do apologise, kind of infatuated with this show right now. Yeah. Back to the episode. So how good can a one-room movie be? One of the most obvious factors in a contained film is, well, how much space do I need? And how much space should I restrict my characters to? If we look at movies like Phone Booth and Oxygen, they both restrict their characters to a space where they can't even move. I mean, they are literally as confined as physically possible. However, you will notice that both movies still create a sense of scale, a sense of environment around the confinement. In Phone Booth, we're on a city street with skyscrapers all around. In O2, where we only have an environment where there's no other human beings involved at all, we actually have access to the outer space, the outer environment through an AI that the character is able to interact with, which gives us some sense of the space outside of the capsule that she's within. Whereas Panic Room, for example, has a lot more space for your characters to run through, move, and develop the story in a very different way. One is more psychological, whereas the other has the opportunity for more physical movement within it. But don't forget, the whole idea, the whole premise to a contained film is it is meant to be a pressure cooker of tension and stress. No matter the characters and their character arc, we've got to feel like this constantly gets more and more like a prison. I forgot my coffee! So let's take a look at this really unique episode of INSIDE No.9. Now, all of the episodes are really quite unique, but this one specifically stands out for the way it's used cameras within its confined story. If you notice, the quality of the camera is actually quite low. The depth of field is huge, really making us feel like it's almost CCTV rather than a cinematic camera. This aids even more in creating a sense of interest. We're interested in seeing real stories. That's why reality TV does so well. But also it creates a sense of documentary, reality. We feel like we're more able to get engrossed in this story because we feel like it's one step closer to reality than the narrative style, the very cinematic style that many of the other INSIDE No.9 episodes go to. So when designing your contained film, think about how you can creatively use your camera within that space.
When my sister died, I really wished I could have had someone to talk to.
Hello, Comfort Support Line. How can I help you?
So what the director has done in this episode is they've come up with a rule, an idea that they can then filter all the creative decisions through to create a sense of cohesive creativity, cohesive ideas. Because he's basically stated, I want to see this story unfold as if I was a character within this world, as if I was actually maybe the security guard watching these events unfold. We now get a really interesting perspective.
You're such a big star to me. You're everything I want to be.
Thank you for making it this far in the episode. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, all the buttons down there. Thank you. You probably still have one of the most major fears of a single space story, and that is, well, variety. Am I keeping my audience interested in this story to begin with? Well, I absolutely hear you, and I actually felt the same way about it until I really started to analyze all of the episodes for INSIDE No.9. So instead of your variety coming from changing locations and going to Hawaii for a big car chase like Fast and Furious, instead, you're going to create your variety in the story itself, through the twists and turns that you create for your main characters that will keep us on our toes, that will keep your audience tied to your story until the very end.
Love you.
Love you too, Rachel. Rebecca.
So in fact, by choosing a confined location, you actually enable your characters to be put in really difficult places. Now, don't get me wrong, this is actually going to make it more difficult to write, but it is also going to make it more unique. So the strength of a contained space here is actually enabling that pressure pot, that pressure cooker environment to push the story along maybe faster than it could in any other space. If you were allowing the characters to get away from their conflict, from the place that they're within, you actually enable them to cool off, to come down from the conflict. Instead, you keep the pressure on, you keep adding to the tension by twisting and turning things, allowing characters to get into false senses of security and then turning it on them at the last second.
They're not my kids. They're yours.
Another benefit of confining your story to one space is just how intimate your audience will get with that space. And the beauty of this is it means you can control how the audience perceive the items that you place within that environment. By focusing on an item at the beginning of your story, you can choose exactly how and when we see that item, how we feel about it, what it means to the overall story. And then by carefully choosing when we see that item again, being after maybe a story twist, you can completely subvert people's understandings of that item within that space, which can really draw your audience into your story because they become even more invested within the space and characters and their journey. It's even better if we clearly see an object from the very beginning, and then only after a very specific story event unfolds do we really start to understand why that item or object is within that space. So from today, you will now know that the contained story is no longer a creative restriction, it's an opportunity. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the episode. You must have really enjoyed watching me talk. I'm humbled. Don't forget to share this episode with anyone else in your life that might enjoy a nice video essay or makes their own films.